Let's take a look at some charts on Augur from this week's article on Brave New Coin. So Augur, or Rep the token, is a decentralized Oracle embedding prediction platform that has essentially been a dead project for a few years now. Version 2 of the project will hopefully breathe some life into it, which is coming likely this month. They've pushed it back a few times now, so we'll see if that actually happens, but currently scheduled for the end of the month. And these are some screenshots of what version 2 should look like. So overall it looks much better than version 1, which you couldn't even really connect to, at least in my experience. It was very hard to actually connect to this stuff, and betting didn't make sense. It was denominated in ETH, so you were exposed to volatility there. They're going to add DAI to the platform, which is the stablecoin from Maker. So all moving in the right direction. We'll see how buggy it is when it's released, but it looks pretty good. And one thing I mentioned in the article is they're going to have to compete with existing prediction markets like the one on FTX. This is just presidential election stuff, but this is simple and it's accessible to people who are already trading on FTX. So the question is there going to be a large swath of people who are just excited to trade on Augur instead of markets they already have access to? We'll see, incentives and fees and all that sort of stuff. Volatility and liquidity, all these things play a role. So we'll see what happens with Augur, but at the very least I'd expect some activity when version 2 finally gets released. This is the smart contract for Augur, and you can see users and volume is just nothing now, which makes sense. It's really unusable. It has been for years, and everyone's just waiting for version 2. At least even I am, to play around with it. So hopefully we'll see it sometime this year, if not by the end of the month. And you'd expect to see a massive uptick in activity if the platform is usable and people like it. That's the seal of approval, really. What is the smart contract doing once version 2 gets released? Still a bunch of money locked in Augur. This is likely just ETH appreciation related, not people depositing money into Augur. Again, this is something I'd watch for when version 2 gets released. If value locked in Augur hits a new all-time high, if it joins the DeFi conversation, things might get a little interesting. I don't know if that'll translate into token value for Augur Rep, but something to consider. This is transactions per day and average transaction values. And you can see with the token migration for version 2 coming up, there was a pretty big, what I'm assuming is migration related. So exchanges and individuals will have to kind of trade in version 1 tokens for version 2 tokens. And that's what you're seeing here, I think, in this massive average transaction value uptick here. And transactions per day have just been flat for the past 3 years. Again, you'd expect if version 2 is successful that this would see new all-time highs week over week, day over day. Lots of people should be interacting with it if it's successful. This is NVT and active addresses in the fill here. Active addresses are certainly up since January, up since April. I think this is all just pre-migration related, not anyone actually using Augur, as we can see by the smart contract. NVT has dropped considerably, again related to migration stuff and just transactions pre-version 2. So all this is kind of meaningless until that platform actually takes off. It's good to have like baseline 0 data, because when active addresses actually start moving up, then you can say, okay, it's finally got more active addresses than it did at its peak. It's got over 1,000 active addresses, which isn't really anything, but that, again, this all goes back to the narrative for the success of version 2. You want active addresses skyrocketing. Let's look at some technicals. Pivots VPVR, 50, 200 EMA, and volume and RSI. First thing that immediately popped out to me was the bear div into a pivot here on RSI, even on volume. Higher highs on less volume, higher highs on less momentum. Into a pivot generally isn't a good sign. So this might be a buy the rumor, sell the news thing initially when version 2 comes out. Now there's not much VPVR resistance on the way up until like 30. But it's really hard to take any of this chart seriously until version 2 comes out and there's sustained user activity, because all this has kind of just been testnet or garbage platform stuff. But the trend says we're good. We're above the accumulation VPVR zone. So all this looks great from a technical perspective, other than the bear div in the near term. Cloud also looks good. It's above the cloud. All the metrics for the cloud are bullish, and it's just kind of V recovery since mid-March. And then on the Augur BTC pair, this also looks pretty good. It's above the 200, it's above the cloud. It's got yearly pivots to deal with. It's got this massive accumulation VPVR zone to deal with around 0.005. That's really the level I'd watch once user activity kicks up for rep. Until then, it'll probably just slosh around slightly above the current price. But you really need user activity. You need some impetus. You need some catalyst for people to buy it and stake Augur. Reporting things on the platform just needs a usable DApp in order to make any sense to capture any value here.